I'm Angela Mettler. I'm an administrative assistant in the president's office at South Dakota Alliance, and this is Steam Cafe. Welcome to Steam Cafe. We do this every third Tuesday. Have been since April of 2018, so almost 5 years. This is a partnership with Hey Brewing and South Dakota Public Broadcasting, and we thank them for what they do for us. We couldn't do it without them, and we also couldn't do it without you. So thank you for coming. For anyone attending virtually, there will be a chance to ask questions of the presenters tonight. So if you type your question into either the chat box or the Q&A box, I will make sure that those get asked at the end of each presentation. Tonight we have a group. There will be 3 different presenters, all working for the National Security Innovation Network, partnership with the Department of Defense, Ellsworth Air Force Base. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jason Combs.
Okay, I was given the option to use it or not, so can you guys hear me fine back there? Okay, so I know a lot of folks here have heard this. There's probably, I'd say, 25% of the people that haven't heard kind of the ensign spiel. My name is Jason Combs. I work for the National Security Innovation Network. I'm a contractor, and we are actually headquartered under an office of the Secretary of Defense office up in DC. I'm permanently located here, and I'm under an MOU with the South Dakota School of Mines. And the basic job of NSIN is to try to help solve DoD problems and use universities as well as venture capital startups to actually tackle problems, to actually harness all the different talents and tools that we have in the universities. And so that's kind of the general idea behind NSIN. What I want to talk about is actually the value to you and kind of where we were as far as a community. So the value to you, NSIN still is accomplishing its goal, but I'm going to change it because you probably want to hear about why do you care about this versus why does NSIN. So I got here about 2.5 years ago, met with a lot of the people in here, and we talked about this vision of how can we actually work with the base that's local as well as other DoD entities. How do we take the talent for the university and actually how do we turn these potentially into businesses? And the idea behind it is a problem with a solution that isn't commercialized. There's no way to buy that and buy the solution. Or a great idea that doesn't have a solution and doesn't have a market, it ends up sitting on a shelf somewhere. So really you have to have a complete chain to be able to do that. So that was the basic concept. I stood up here and I said, hey, I am looking for help and people who want to partner to do this. And there's a handful of folks that were like, hey, let's give this a shot. It builds opportunities for our community. It builds opportunities for our students. It actually starts helping out the local base, helps out our community and our local military installation, and then helps out the broader DoD. So when I stood up here before, I had a slide that had like a couple dots on it. We didn't really have any programs. We had one course that we were teaching called Innovating for National Security. It was a lean startup course out of industrial engineering, and we barely got a group of 3 teams together and ran that in the fall. Actually, John Barber was in our first class, and that was all we had as far as this diagram up there. We had no examples of successes. We were struggling to even find a problem to work with out at the base. And so where we've come since that, at that time, I want to kind of highlight this and really talk about the components, but I'm going to go do the reveal right now. We didn't have this before. We've got a group of part of our team. Some of the other parts of the team are actually located in other parts of the U.S. that's actually here to come talk to you from their perspective. We also have a startup that was formed out of one of the projects this summer that actually is continuing on with Todd Gagney as a mentor and going through one of our local incubators that's working with computer science. So we're actually, starting to achieve what we talk about. We've got a long ways to go, but I want to hit on the potential, and I also want to talk about how we've actually taken advantage of that potential. I think added value to everybody out here. So the slide that I've got up here, really this is from the perspective of Ellsworth. Since the organization that I work for is a DoD organization, it's really to go out and solve Ellsworth's problems. So there's parts on here that don't talk about what Mines has done. Mines ran 3 different startups through an accelerator that NSIN has also. I don't have that listed up here. But what I do want to show you is, traditionally we're considered one of the flyover states. We're a lower populated state. And that makes it very difficult to get access. And this is, coming from DC, this is very much the perspective. If you're Nebraska, if you're South Dakota, Wyoming, all these others, it can be very, very difficult. This right here is all the connections that we've been able to connect back to Ellsworth to help them. So Ellsworth has come out and said, hey, here's the challenges that we have. We're looking for talent to help us tackle these problems. And these are the areas that we've connected with. So the blue ones are the universities. That's a combination of students. We've had faculty. We've had faculty that have come in that are basically SMEs from their, in this case, from energy, that have gone in and assisted us with some of our problems. And then a bunch of students. South Dakota Mines is a bigger number on there. One, that's where I'm attached to. The other one is the agreement that we had was, let's figure out how to work together and let's figure it out locally. And once we kind of become masters locally, then let's go ahead and start expanding out. So that's part of the reason why that number is larger. I do expect that it will continue to be larger, but we also want to bring in other talent and other universities because that's beneficial to Ellsworth also to get that diversity. And I would love to pump out the South Dakota talent more, but that's the reason why those numbers are that way. The other thing I wanted to hit up on here is on the top, we call these NSIN programs. I normally talk to them about game spaces. So one of the best ways to actually make and have an impact is to have a shared experience. So all of these programs and all of these different ideas and funding and money, without having like a structure of these are the people that should come to this event, this is how we expect them to interact, and this is what we expect on the outcome. There's no way to make that happen unless you have structure. So NSIN programs allow us to take resources, put them together in a program or game space with an expected outcome. So if I've got students, I may have a different program than if I have somebody that has the background of faculty. And that's kind of the way to think of the programs. It provides a structure so I can actually take people, put them together, and actually expect to have good outcomes or have at least something I can critique later. And then the bottom down there, I put on the startup collaboration. So we've had 21 different collaborations with startups with Ellsworth, and 24 is basically, you can see that there's a couple of them that have worked with Ellsworth on more than one occasion. What I want to highlight on that is we didn't have that kind of interaction with the base until we started working as a team. So there's a tremendous amount of opportunities locally if we want to take advantage of it to solve Ellsworth's problems. So although a majority of these companies are not located locally, that's just because we haven't matured to that point. So the idea is how do we start developing more kind of seed corn, if you will, as far as startups, because there's not a shortage of problems and we have expertise. Lori, do you mind raising your hand? So Ms. Vega is the senior civilian at the base. She oversees basically all the stuff that like a city manager would, which obviously has a lot of dual use application. And she's also one of the AFWorks, which is the Air Force SBIR evaluators. And so she has a lot of expertise. Now she can't evaluate sibling companies that she has interest or the base has interest in, but we have a lot of different capability out there that's very unique to this area. So I just share that with you because this is potential, and then what we do with it, we can leave it or we can continue to build upon it. And I would love to continue to build from where we started about 2.5 years to where we are. Let's see how we could diversify, because ideally, I would like to see more startups here locally, and I would like to be able to see us push our talent out and have a much more kind of, I guess, balanced push and pull, if you will. And that's consistent with what NSIN is trying to do. So anyway, that's kind of where we've been and what we've done. And I want to say thank you, but I also want to kind of highlight that we haven't even tapped even probably 5 or 10% of the potential that we have locally, but it takes a lot of work and a lot of mentoring because we don't have the structure. Most communities that are our size or a little bit bigger already have some of these structures. So this won't happen unless we build it. We can't take a model from what we've seen in California because they have a lot of things that just don't exist. People haven't seen the pathway and haven't seen the examples. So we really have to keep the flywheel going. So I'm going to stop there. Any questions on that? Anybody have anything? Or any ads or anything? I don't want to put anybody, I'm going to go like this. I don't put anybody on the spot. Anybody? Because I know, like I said, there's quite a few folks here that are part of these dots up here. So anyway. Okay, with that said, I'm gonna hand it over to our three teams. So what you're gonna hear today is one of the programs we have is during the summer. We have a 10-week program, we call it X-Force Fellowship. And we normally take anywhere from 3 to 4 university students, it can be all the way from a freshman to a grad student to PhDs, all across the US, and we match them to different DoD problems. What we had this year is we had 3 problems at Ellsworth. One was basically on the gates. There's 11 different gates out at the base, and they'll talk about that. There was also one on, at the end of the year, there's a list of things that have not been funded, and basically trying to prioritize and figure out what is the most important one to the wing commander. And it's much more challenging because there's different types of monies, there's different restrictions on it, and different things to buy de-risk different areas. Something might be mission, something might be safety. So that's one of the projects. And then the other one was when you get out to the base, they have a road condition where they try to communicate across the base, what's the condition? Should you be out traveling? What's the speed that should be out there? And the difficulty is figuring out how to do that, and then also how to have the sign not get destroyed by the winds. So everybody that's from here realizes that the winds here locally probably are like 30 to 45 miles an hour. They get to like 60 to 100 out at the base. And that ends up causing some problems, and you'll hear about that. So anyway, with this group, the thing I want to emphasize is unlike other fellowships, really what we give them is we're like, hey, here's the problem. This is what we think it is. We need you to get validated and then really come back and tell us how you think it should be solved, and make sure to stay and connect. And as engineers, sometimes they don't like to interface that much. Actually talk to the people that you're working for and get their feedback. And so it's a great opportunity to actually teach them to go out instead of build something and come back 10 weeks later, work on it. The next week you're checking in, hey, this is what we found and this is what we're working on. And you'll hear some different hurdles that they went through and as they went through the project. So with that said, the first one that's going to talk is Skylar. He worked on the road condition. He did a lot of the programming. He's going to talk about some of the ME stuff. What you'll also see is there's a lot of kind of cross discipline that all of these teams learned and applied. All of them are terrified, so make sure that you ask really, really hard questions. But in seriousness, as they go through, even if you want to ask during the briefing, I think that may be a little bit more interactive. That's not the standard here normally. But if you have questions as they're going through, I'll moderate if we're getting off track. But ask them, because they love what they did. They love talking about it. But really part of this is for you to kind of understand what their experience is. So, Skylar, you ready?
Yes, sir.
Cool.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Skylar Tyler, and I was a part of Air Force 5, Project ROADCON. So Brandon and Weston went back to their own states that they live in. Since I'm still going to School of Mines currently, I was the only one available. So I am most qualified. So I'm a senior/junior electrical engineer at School of Mines. So primarily, the main issue at Ellsworth Air Force Base were these kind of old signs right there. So they wanted to add in another light to indicate no one's on the road whatsoever, while still keeping the green, yellow, and red. However, with these older devices, they would occasionally break down and they would run into a massive amount of issues. So the main problems were sign locations. So these were every here and there, residents would complain about it, they can't see it, stuff like that. And then another big issue was when a big enough wind would come in, it would break the base of the housing, and these things would just tumble over, the electronics inside would crack, all kinds of horrible, disastrous things. Then there was problems with the communication system. So security forces would try and say, we're changing road conditions to, let's say, yellow. And they'd wait. Nothing would go through. They'd try it again. Nothing would go through. disconnect, they try to boot up the whole system, and it didn't get anywhere. And lastly was battery corrosion. Initially, when we first opened up these battery boxes on the devices, it was just piles of battery acid all over. So I'm gonna break down the legend before I go into this. So everything in red are the broken signs. So first one we looked at, which we actually have a picture of the housing where these signs broke. Then previous signs are in black, so right there. These are where signs are still up, they're still semi-operating, they're not broken, or some of them are shut off. So the ones in yellow are where we recommend to put signs, which is still completely up to the Air Force and the senior leadership. And everything in green is also recommended. And then on the far left are the approximate GPS locations of where everything is at for these signs. So, talking about broken signs. This is the base plate where the pole would get mounted into the ground. And on this one, wind picked up, and that whole front panel acted as a sail. Same thing with the solar panel. Everything just pushed over, and it just sheared off that little bit of metal. So we also noticed this, another issue is they wouldn't put the pole in the ground all the way. There's little threads within that little house, post, so they would just screw it in. They wouldn't cement the pole in, they would just screw it in, all good. And structurally, we found that to be highly inefficient. So next up was our K and K crosstalk. So these signs are about 10, 15 years old. So a lot of the systems were outdated. And one of the signs we investigated, we found one of the antennas, which is right there. It was all twisted up, wound up, so the signal couldn't get through to the antenna. So it couldn't send a signal saying, hey, this is down, or nor could it receive a signal. So the battery corrosion, there's a small piece of battery acid right there. This also does provide a small health risk to anyone operating on these. This was more of the more tame batteries with battery acid. We found a couple solutions using thermal grease, liquid tape, and I believe there's one other that's escaping my mind currently. But since these are 10 to 15 years old, the battery corrosion does build up over time. So kind of yearly maintenance would solve this. So we gave the Air Force two options. One was a prototype we built in-house, designed it, ran it through simulations, all kinds of stuff. And then option two was an outsourced by a company called Sun & One, where they design signs very similar to what the Air Force needed and ship them to different cities, counties, wherever. So, like I said, I'm an electrical engineer. I don't know much about the simulation stuff, but so these were our post-base designs. So for initial simulations, we were like, all right, what's the maximum amount of wind that occurs at Ellsworth? So I believe it was like the maximum we ever saw was like 120, 130. So we're like, okay, what if we actually get up to 150 hours? Push it to the absolute extreme and then test it. So this was our final design. I believe we had 10 initial designs. This was the best one. So the stress at the base was 70 psi, displacement was 0.01 millimeters, and contact force with the pole was 180 newtons. So this is our housing design. So our main microcontroller or microcomputer would sit right in there. We'd also have a relay system to turn on and off the lights. So in descending order, it'd be green, yellow, red, and then black. So we kind of designed this around, okay, we're gonna have new airmen coming up, they're most likely gonna be installing these, so we wanna make it as easy as possible for anyone just to get in here, put in the parts, wire everything up, and then test it. If it doesn't work, they can easily debug it. That was the whole premise around mainly our design. So some of the pros is it can be improved after it's been implemented. Physical prototype is available to the on-site leadership. I believe we still have our prototype with 2 lights. Costs approximately $7,000. That depends on primarily all of the metal components. So I believe it was an 8-foot pole, solar panels, more of the industrial size things. Then it's for hardware and software, it's easily debugged. If you cross a wire somewhere, you can easily figure it out. And then for the software, I was trying to make it as simple as possible without digging into too many complex things. The cons, it does require mechanical and electrical assembly. Radio frequency range. So the communication system that we had for initial range was, I believe, a little over 1 mile. We tested it in non-ideal scenarios, but right out of the box it said 1 mile. We have more steps to get to the final product, implement it, and then slower data retrieval and transfer. So sending out, hey, turn this light to green, or a command, change all lights to red. So it takes a little bit more time for each system to read in the data, be like, okay, confirmed, here you go. I also forgot to bring up I believe it was the manufacturing on base actually designed that part, and we had it printed out. So option 2, or outsource. So we didn't see any physical prototype on this. Best thing we got was this small control panel right there to indicate what color of lighting there was and a couple other details. Then this was our initial design for the actual sign itself. So I believe Sun 1 was going with the 2-sided sign, so people coming from either direction could see it, so it increases visibility. And some of the pros for this, it is professional grade, takes a lot less labor to install and assemble. It's easily replicated, just send in a order to Sun 1 and they'll have them shipped. There's a warranty included with it. Our prototype did not come with that. Then it is dual-sided, so increased visibility. Cons are physical prototype, and it's about 10,000. I think we saw upwards of 11, depending on the day. And then some of the main lessons we learned. Talking to everyone, so that includes airmen, their spouses, workers, primarily everyone who lives in the area benefits from this greatly. And also talking with security forces, because they're the ones who are mainly in control of this whole system. And if they're struggling, that's only going to trickle down into everyone else. And some questions to think about are, what option sounds better to you guys? And then what needs to be changed or adapt to better meet the expectations, or senior leadership expectations? That is it.
Anybody got any questions for Skylar?
So I'm a complete layperson. This guy, where you go back to the diagram of the lights, kind of like an actual stoplight. There you go. Okay, just as a complete, I look at that and my brain says, why does it go red, yellow, green, black?
So part of our design, so on the original signs, it was just green, yellow, and then red. So for black, we didn't know if we should put that higher up or just have an entire sign with just black lights on it, just indicating flashing or something along those lines. This came out to be the easiest process. Was let's keep the same thing in place that they have. Let's just add another light indicator below it, so people who are most frequenting this area can easily identify it better. Because there's something they're used to, so now we just have one more just to indicate.
What order is the stoplight in?
So it's still in the same order, or stoplight. Yeah.
Okay, we're used to.
Yeah.
A traffic light,
Yes.
So the whole world, from the time you start to drive, you're driving around and it's always red, yellow, green. So back to your mind and what you see, to me, the red and the green should be flip-flopped.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're black, but like I said, I'm just a lay person.
I can explain that a little bit. So the Air Force, what they do is green is everything's good to go, you drive speed. Yellow means lower your speed a little bit, so they're going to top, good to go, solid. Yellow, there's a caution, so everything can slow down a little bit. Red, you really have to start slowing down. Black, you cannot be on the road. So they go top down. Yeah, that's what you're saying. Yeah, that's culturally. Oh, yes. So, but that's the reason they have it. Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, the next group is gate defense. So anybody who's been at the gate, they've got some serpentine gates that are for traffic control, keeping people from going too fast as they're going in and out of the gate. These gates, they will get into the details, but they look like just any other gate. They did a little bit of research and realized that they're not just like any other gate, and I don't want to steal their thunder. You got to make sure they're not holding their fingers up behind. These are the two pranksters that I had in the group. So they're both metallurgical engineers. This is a case where we actually did reach out for a specific backgrounds. One of them is a rancher. I actually looked at the resume. I'm like, hey, this is probably a problem that actually is more like a ranch, and you're going to see some of this in there. So although it's probably going to be funny, that actually was by design of when we were going through the resumes, which again is part of this partnership that I think is pretty special with it. So with that said, I will hand it over to our gate defense.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. Again, we are the gate defense team, and we were designated Air Force One.
My name's Mason Lane. I'm a junior metallurgical engineer.
And I'm Caleb Pfluger. I'm also junior metallurgical engineer. And then our third member, Elijah Retzel, he's a senior mechanical engineer. All three of us are based here at School of Mines. And he had a big senior project coming up, but he couldn't be here tonight.
So the initial problem was that gate security was made difficult due to these manual swing gates. And they were hard to maneuver. They were extremely heavy. The biggest one was up to 1,000 pounds, we measured. And when it got snowy and icy up there, it would actually freeze to the ground. This would increase vulnerability also, because you'd have to have people come out of the shack to work with these gates. And there are smaller security force people, and some of them wouldn't even be able to move it. So we tried to focus on 3 key points, which were the hinge design, which you can see here is essentially just a metal rod that they put down through a couple brackets that had holes in them, and a wheel trying to get rid of it if possible, and then automation was a larger part of what the base wanted to see done, and we try to keep it as cost effective as possible. So what we did was we ended up deciding we needed a prototype to test how much the hinges we found could actually hold. And so here we have us cutting up the metal and welding it all together, and then finally putting in a post and setting the whole hydraulic system up with a prototype of a hydraulic automation system that we made ourselves. And this is a video of us measuring how much force it actually took to get the original gates to move using a calf scale. It was about 120 pounds of force just to move it out of the rut.
Can you guys talk briefly on why you're not in the base? Why there's posts there, where those are located? Because that was another issue they ran into, is how do you test a gate at a military installation? They're not going to let people just go climb around it. So that was another problem they had to figure out.
Yeah, so as you could guess, they probably didn't want us to take their gate or anything like that. So we ended up having to drive our own post and put together our own gate and try to do it cost effectively too. We're not giving a very large budget, especially for what we were trying to do.
The school helped us out a lot with that. I went and talked to our facilities, and they allowed us to actually put it in out behind the school, ways up on the Baja track that we have up there. So a lot of these pictures are us kind of just out there putting in these posts and stuff. And just an early disclaimer for our prototype. It rained on us at one point, so our initial post that we set got loose in the ground and wouldn't hold the gate that we wanted to, so we had to set a second post to anchor it down a little bit.
Here is the final product. We've finally gotten the entire thing put together, and the whole system's put together right here.
Mason, can you go back and can you just talk briefly what those components are? So most people looking at our pin sure.
Okay,
what
yeah.
we did.
So we rigged up a hydraulic arm to swivel on this point right here, with the gate being here. This is our pump for the actual hydraulic fluid to extend and retract the hydraulic arm. And then this is a jumper cable to actually power the pump that's going to his truck.
Alright, so as far as implementation and stuff that we offered the base to go forward with, so we were kind of told to set it up and like a step-by-step process where each of the plans that we present can stand alone, but they're each building upon each other. So an example, we kind of were given like, you start out with like a Healy, and then you evolve into a scooter, and then you finally evolve into the motorcycle. So that's kind of like the background behind the pictures. So our first plan that we gave them, we really focused on the hinges and the wheels just to make the actual manual operation much easier, so anyone on base could move those gates. Well, after doing some research, what we found, that's the actual brand name that we found, Shut It 100-Year Badass Hinge, and so it's got 3 bearings in it, which allows for really easy movement, and those things can hold up to 1,500-pound gates, so they were like a perfect fit for the project that we had. And then similarly, on some of the longer gates, since they were so long, they still drooped a little bit at the end. So to fix their wheel problem, because basically what they were using was a plastic wheel boat jack, and that would really just freeze to the ground solid. So we looked at some pneumatic options, but they weren't really fitting with what we wanted, so we ended up recommending a flat-free solid rubber tire. So for plan 2, our homemade system, it's kind of a closer up picture that you can see. That's what we designed. It took us about 2 weeks to weld everything and acquire all the parts and stuff once we actually had everything planned out. So some of the pros are it's relatively inexpensive, as you'll see, compared to our professional outsource that we found. It only cost us about $800 to build that, minus the actual cost of the gate. And then it provides automation, which is one of the key points that they wanted so that the guards wouldn't actually have to leave the shack. However, some of the big cons were obviously you're gonna have to build the thing in-house. It'll take time and labor. Measurements will need to be taken. So since we weren't able to use the actual base gates, we had to slightly alter the design of our gates. Basically the gates on base were 2x6, 1/4-inch gauge square tubing, or rectangular tubing, so that's why they were so heavy. We couldn't afford to replicate those identically, so we used 2x2 3/8 gauge or 3/16 gauge steel tubing for our gate. So the other thing with our automation, we had a little remote that came with the hydraulic pump, and you could run that to the shack, but the road would probably need to be tore up for them to actually run it underground so that the electrical wire wasn't exposed on top. And so this is our prototype in action.
No students were electrocuted in this. And what you can't see is both of those posts are actually moving. There's that much of a moment arm on there that's not nearly as heavy as the base gates. So I mean, there's an incredible amount of force there.
Yeah, and the ones on the actual posts on base, they can still use theirs. They're, I think they're like 6-inch by 6-inch squared. I don't know if they were solid or not, but they're actually bolted and cemented into the ground. So they're a lot more sturdy than our hand-dug posts that we put in ourselves. So finally, we offered up our professional outsourced option. It's kind of a similar design to ours. We kind of based ours off of theirs a little bit. So the pros of this one is there's dealer installation, there was no in-house fabrication, and again, it provides automation. The big con is cost, and then there's a big electronics box that goes alongside of it, but that does allow for a lot more hands-off controlling from potentially across base. So the quote that we got from the base was $21,000 before installation, and then installation they said pretty much double it. So it's a pretty hefty price if they went with that option. And then just some quick specs, it had like a 15 to 20 second response time, and you could move both gates at the same time. It had a warranty. They were rated for the temperature around here. I think it was about -40 degrees Fahrenheit all the way up to 150. And then there was a backup battery option in case the power went out. So that was pretty much our thing. And then questions.
So is there a design specification reason that this needed to be a swinging gate as opposed to a sliding gate or lift gate?
No, there wasn't, but how the roads, how they were set up, if you slid some of those gates, they'd obstruct into the exit lane, so we didn't have a lot of room to work with that way. And we just found it was easier to use swing gates rather than like a vertical arm.
Any other questions?
Great, thanks guys. So one other thing I really want to emphasize is literally going through this, they had multiple problems, and this goes for all the teams here. And although they would check in with Lori and I every week, they were just getting updates and going, hey, this is what we ran into, this is what we plan on doing, you know, any kind of redirection or whatever. So the other thing that was very interesting on the teams is all of them came up with 2 different options. And really what we were stressing is make sure that you're providing value to the base, in this case to Lori Vega. And what they did is they said, hey, let's go ahead and look at a commercial option, and we also think we can get a prototype option. And you know, there's cases where it may be better to go with the slightly more expensive. In this case, I mean, it's a lot more expensive. But I thought that was also unique, and saw that out of all the different teams. At least 2 of them where it was more applicable. In John's case, there wasn't necessarily a commercial option out there. But all of this, I really want to emphasize as far as what they're able to do. Because I think sometimes people look at like a summer fellowship with
a university student, like, yeah, they're going to do whatever work. Literally, I mean, people purchased the stuff that they were producing, and they did it in 10 weeks' time. So, with that said, we're going to finish off with John Barber. John actually has been working with us, like I said, for quite some time, has gone through an entrepreneurial course at the school. And out of this, I wasn't expecting to see a business idea, but he and his team did one. And they actually have a real, mentor who's part of, I think, is he part of the Angel Fund also here? Is Todd? So also an angel investor locally, and also standing up a local incubator who's going to be his mentor with his two other business partners. So with that said, I'm going to hand it over to John. Thank you.
Hi, my name is John, and I was working on the Unfunded List project this summer for the Exports Fellowship with my teammate Sebastian now. He's at Texas A&M, so he wasn't able to make it today. So the Ellsworth Unfunded List is a database that's used to prioritize and manage items that are not funded by Congress, but they're still essential for Ellsworth Air Force Base operations. These are known as unfunded requirements. And there's tens of millions of dollars worth of unfunded requirements that are handled throughout the year. So this list has to be effective, easy to use, and reliable. When we got the list, this is what we see, or what we saw, and right off the bat, we noticed that some of the categories, there weren't consistent data formats, so that it was hard to compare different items. Also, the justifications column is probably hard to see, but in the middle there's much larger blocks of text. This one's expanded to see it a little better, but when we noticed there wasn't a standard operating procedure to kind of write the justifications in a certain way so that items were comparable with each other, which we thought might be difficult to prioritize them with. So right off the bat, we dug into our problem statement and were able to meet with our problem sponsors, Lori Vega and Laura Harbison, as well as our NSIN mentor, Jason Combs. And through that interview, we validated our assumptions that this list might not have the best user experience. The information on it isn't always consistent. Sometimes it's not accurate because of user error. And just typing into the list, there's not any data validation functionality within the Excel spreadsheet. And then this list is managed from different beneficiary groups by sending it via email. So there's also data that's just not up to date because of the email process used. So the approach that we took was to first have our customer validation interviews and to try to really understand what the core problems were, and then iterate our or create demos of how we think the problem would be solved, and continue to get validation based off of our demonstrations and continue to build out a prototype that we thought would solve their problems. And we repeated that process throughout the duration of the fellowship. We encountered a roadblock, which Jason guided us through, which was that there's a lot of beneficiary groups at the base who all use the unfunded list, and each of them required different sort of features. And we saw this big problem and wanted to be able to help everybody, but that just wasn't going to be realistic within the time frame that we had. So we realized that the unfunded list, it's not a one-stop shop, but each group needs its own solution and a solution to connect all of them to. So the beneficiary groups that we identified were our resource advisors who need to be able to compile items onto the list and also prioritize them. The contracting squadron that deals with creating the contracts and managing that sort of documentation flow. And there's contracting has problems with managing the documentation, whether it's finding them or locating where problems are in the list. That takes oftentimes 2 hours just to resolve one item on the list. Finance is the kind of the focal point of where this all these items come down. And so they need a lot more functionality, and they need to be able to see a lot more information that other groups don't need to. And then the council of deputies needs to be able to have a decision-making tool so that they can quickly prioritize these items and be able to make those important decisions. And so the beneficiary group that we chose to focus on to be able to provide a useful product by the end of our fellowship was the council of deputies. And so we knew that we needed to be able to make the data searchable so that the council of deputies can look for certain categories of items and be able to quickly see items that match a certain category so they can compare them and prioritize them. And so those sorts of categories can be whether or not the item is executable, whether or not it closes a write-up, or what kinds of funds it has, and in some other categories, but these were the main ones that we found were most important. So here I have a demonstration. It might be kind of hard to see, but this is just an Excel dashboard that we can easily filter out certain items depending on what sort of categories they are, which will help when the council of deputies. Sorry, I forgot to explain this. The council of deputies meets once a month to prioritize these items, and later in the year, as they get closer to the end of the fiscal year, they meet twice a month, and they have to go through a list of sometimes hundreds of items and be able to prioritize each of them. So having an easy way to filter out and see each item becomes a lot more important. This next demo is this is the data sheet that this is the version that we created compared to what I showed you earlier. And that data, a new item can be added, and then the dashboard can be easily updated. And then here, another thing another pain point dealing with the data sheet was that items that were added or needed to be reprioritized, there was just a tedious Excel, like change the number and then you have to change all the numbers around it, which when you're having a meeting with hundreds of items, that's taking the time of like high-ranking military personnel. We thought that would be it would be good to provide them a solution that they could just re-rank an item and click a button and not have to worry about dealing with any sort of Excel technical difficulties. And that's what this demonstration shows. And then multiple items can also be re-ranked at the same time. So the next steps that we took were we added a new team member, Manasi Manaj, who is also a Texas A&M graduate, and she's also been through the Hacking for Defense NSIN program. Our plan was to build out an Excel product for each beneficiary group, and then link those different products through SharePoint so that each group had the most up-to-date information. And then use that as a way to validate what we were providing, and then with that develop a commercial software suite and distribute to Ellsworth and then other Air Force bases across the country. From our customer validation interviews, we've heard a lot that other Air Force bases use this exact same process and have this same problem. And so now where we're at is we started it in LLC, and we've been continuing to work with the base, and we're super excited to continue to work on this problem. We've all grown very passionate about trying to solve this because we've seen how many hours that's actually taking. We've estimated that during the busiest times of the year that maybe over 100 hours a day partake in just tracking down documentation across the resource advisors on multiple levels of the hierarchy, contracting and finance. And so we're really excited to try to improve that efficiency and make an impact on the Air Force Base. So thank you.
I'm going to ask a quick question before anybody else does. So John, can you tell us, why did you guys use Excel? Why didn't you just program something?
We wanted to use Excel because it seems like a really easy way to be able to prototype and demonstrate things easily so that we could understand and validate the problems as fast as we could.
One of the other challenges is getting something on the network. So the Excel with the power tools gave the ability to actually put something and implement immediately, get immediate value, and get feedback on it. And then anybody have a guess on what John's area of studies is? Any guesses? I bet you're all thinking he's a chemie, right? He actually is. He's a chemical engineer. So I want to highlight again the kind of talent that we have with engineers and kind of the way they think about this. So the other engineer that worked at them, I think, was Ellsworth. Yeah. So, okay, give the tough questions to John. Go ahead, Matt.
The idea that you have a national potential here is really exciting, right? You take this business and expand it to the wide and retire to 40 or whatever. Good view. But there's a lot to that. And having been able to receive the support from local community, those who need to be able to trade that kind of things.
Yeah, we've been we're extremely fortunate to be able to develop a mentorship circle, and really has made us feel a lot more confident that we might be able to be connected and to deliver this to potentially other Air Force bases. So yeah, we've been super fortunate.
There's also some financials that they have that are on the horizon, like $5,000 that they're probably going to be competitive for, and follow-on funding options that are out there as they keep on making progress, assuming that they continue to provide value. One other thing I want to highlight, Brian, you might share and just kind of your comment on whatever programming or that John has done. He presented somewhere too.
Absolutely, I'll repeat the fact that John is a chemistry or engineer.
A chemical.
Yeah. You don't see chemical engineers writing software the way I saw John write some software a couple of weeks ago. He actually participated in the Application Development Club, which is a newly formed club on campus, and he actually blew the other computer science students in the room out of the water when it came to just putting an online resume up on the screen. So I was really impressed.
I appreciate you sharing that. So again, the reason why I'm sharing this is because we have a lot of this going on, and actually there are people who were just having a meeting earlier today talking about how do we better synchronize our efforts. Brian runs runs the senior design in the computer science department, which is the reason why I was asking him specifically. And we work a lot together as far as making sure to do this. I just wanted to highlight though that this is something that I continually see as we work towards like problem solving, entrepreneurship of engineers. They're good at problem solving. And I think sometimes we get too focused on what their background is. Now I will caveat that I did pick particular like with the metallurgical, because I knew that there was going to be some stuff dealing with the gates that was going to be useful. But in general, I mean, a lot of capability, it really doesn't matter what the area of study is. With that said, sure, anybody have any other hard questions for John?
The initial, it looked like an Excel file, a big page with all those colors and text and all that. Was that, did you guys just scrap that and start over, or how did you work with that to come up with more things?
Well, first we, I guess, tried to learn what everything meant, and then from there, from the problems we heard, we saw how maybe some of the categories could be adjusted or even split into two different categories. That was more searchable and maybe more useful. But we definitely used it as a tool for what we need to provide throughout the fellowship.
It's crazy. When I saw that, I was like, wow.
It's painful.
Yeah.
I'm on the council, I consider
you're talking about, towards the end of the year, we actually rack and stack that sometimes a day. Just to, because we executed in the month of September $40 million off that list. So, and I gotta say this on this team, they picked up our language more quickly than anybody I've ever seen. We speak a whole different language, right? So not only did they have to take that Oracle Excel sheet, they had to figure out what everything on it meant, and speaking the code. So it's been, you know, I can't wait to use the module we have, because we're gonna load this year, we just kicked off this year, so we're gonna actually use that module for the council of deputies, so it'll get really used in practice. Awesome.
And Lori, is there anything else you want to highlight that we didn't cover anything? I mean, you're ultimately the person that we're working for, so.
Well, you know, all of these projects, we're actually doing something very similar. So for the ROADCON, we're probably gonna go with the commercial option, but the prototype is actually an innovation cell on the base, and so I've been tinkering with that, so that may come back. But the unfunded list is gonna have the road signs on it actually for this coming year, so the reason we didn't buy them at the end of this year is we don't want to be final for those contracts. This being one of them, we have to do a lot of pre-work on that, so we couldn't get that executed. This winter, we bring on seasonal workers to do snow removal, but they also happen to be guys that build stuff, so they're gonna work on the gates. So the hinges are gonna get replaced, the wheels are gonna get replaced, and possibly they're gonna rebuild the gates with volume material. Because the gates are overbuilt, which I think you guys discovered. We're not trying to stop the car, we're trying to slow it down. So we can go lighter, which will solve some of the problems. So we're gonna start working through some of those solutions, and then with the unfunded list, you heard me talk about that, because that is a nightmare. And I've talked to multiple other bases, and they are all dealing with the same nightmare and want to be part of whatever we come up with. So everything that came out of this summer is getting put in use, and just like you guys did the rollers to the skateboard to the motorcycle, we kind of do the same thing, because a lot of the solutions are very expensive, so we build up to those big ones like the gate. Eventually we'll get our gates off, but can't afford to do that right away. And with changing mission and some of the things going on at Ellsworth, we probably don't want to invest until we figure out how that all pans out in terms of traffic flow and everything, but we can make it better thanks to you guys. So it all had practical application, is all usable, and will make things better for us.
So what I also heard, Lori, is the fact that everything starts with Jason's Hughes. Is that what it is?
Yeah, pretty much.
That'd be awesome if I go out like on TV. Two quick things. One, we're going to be starting recruiting for the next summer fellowship. So please have students contact me. The word is getting out better. I appreciate the help from communications and marketing. The other thing I wanted to say thanks to is we've got Tim Houghton from HS Precision here. He actually also helped quite a bit with the fellowship. Gave the students a chance to go down and take a look at HS and talk about entrepreneurship, which is really a lot of what we're trying to instill also. So I really appreciate you opening up the shop and spending time and giving them a chance to see what entrepreneurship looks like in small businesses and really cool tech. So
we're happy to do it. So we'll continue to do it.
Okay, just wanted to say thanks again for coming. And thanks to our presenters tonight, it was very interesting. Like I said, we do this every third Tuesday. So next month, the date is November 15th. And the presentation is Dr. Rodney Rice, who is an Emeritus Professor of Humanities at Mines and a retired Air Force veteran. He's going to present on the book Bombs Away by John Steinbeck, which was written during World War II, and the different literary types that Steinbeck used to get his point across. The book was actually commissioned by the US government, so it's a nonfiction book by John Steinbeck. Should be pretty interesting. So, thanks for coming.